Hey everybody, welcome to She's Smart. I'm your host, Maria Robotham. On today's episode, I have Michelle Ruiz, a contributing culture editor at Vogue and frequent cover story author at Vanity Fair. She has profiled Giselle, Bad Bunny, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is a freelance journalist for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and more, covering emergent social trends, gender, politics, and the British royal family. We get into all of this and so much more in the episode. A quick disclaimer, toward the end of the episode, we discuss a book entitled Ejaculate, Responsibly, which is about abortion. So get cozy as we connect, learn, and laugh together on She's Smart. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Congratulations on the podcast.
Oh my God, thank you. I just like to jump right in.
Let's just jump right in.
I have a million notes. You have been a contributing editor for Vanity Fair. You've interviewed Giselle, Bad Bunny, Jenna Ortega, and the British royal family. Like, I interviewed them, but you've covered them, yes. Right? And amongst other things that we're going to get to. Yes. But my first question is, how did you come into journalism?
I came into it by, I think, just a love of writing, a love of reading, realizing I went to college for international business, but I really didn't know what that meant. I just thought it sounded like a job that I would like to have. I don't know, international business, you have to be a grown up and get a job. So I wasn't thinking about what am I good at? What do I enjoy? But then I went to college and couldn't even hack it in the prerequisites for that major. And then just really quickly realized, okay, I should obviously be an English major and a Spanish major. I should write. And what job can I get that would allow me to be writing? And it was just a very quick pivot to realizing that this is what I should do. And then I interned at ABC News Radio, and then I got hired there after I graduated, and I worked there for 5 years. So that was my first job.
In the radio part of it.
Yes. And it was a 24-hour radio newsroom. Wow. So ABC News had all of these affiliate radio stations, and then we were basically like the nucleus blasting the news out to all of these stations. So we had correspondents everywhere, or if something crazy happened, I was kind of like an off-air reporter / producer writer. So something would happen and I would get on the phone and start trying to get audio, reporting. I remember a bridge collapsed. And so it was Google Maps, okay, what businesses are by this bridge? And, calling them and being like, what do you see? What's happening? And then making clips out of that and writing copy for the radio and sending it out. And
did you enjoy that part of it?
I did. It wasn't the job I wanted. I think I wanted to be doing what I'm doing now. I wanted to be an intern at Vanity Fair or Glamour or something.
Yeah.
But that was 2004. And I think the intern at Vanity Fair was Graydon Carter's niece and neighbor. Yeah. And then that was it. I didn't go to one of these schools I didn't major in journalism. I didn't have that pipeline. So I took the job that I could get.
Yeah.
And it was actually it was really exciting. It never slept, literally. It was a 24-hour newsroom. So when you were young, I used to work sometimes a 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. shift.
Yeah.
Or a 4:30 to 12:30 in the morning shift.
You're just doing it because that's the job.
You're just doing it because someone has to be manning that news. Because if a tsunami happened, it did, if it happened at 6 a.m. and no one's there, that doesn't work.
And then you miss it completely.
Someone has to be there at all times.
No, I talk about a learning experience. You literally were doing all of it. You were thrown into writing, producing. It wasn't just here, you sit here and do the copy.
The deadline was just a constant thing. And it was an amazing learning experience because it was learning to just write really quickly, but accurately and cleanly. You can't waste words when you're handing it to, a veteran anchor who's been on the radio forever. And this now from doing this, where when you're speaking words versus reading words, the spoken word has to be pretty tight and concise. Mm-hmm. And it was. It was the 2004 election. It was the 2008 election. So it was being there on election night, seeing how that unfolds. A lot of times you're learning things before the rest of the world learns things.
Yeah.
So I think it was the deaths of Saddam Hussein's sons.
Okay.
So like the pictures are coming into our email and we're learning about that and they haven't put it out there yet. And it's like a lot of times it was being like you're really, really there on the razor's edge of what's going on in the world.
That's exciting.
So it was cool.
Okay. You covered the red carpet at one point.
So I was in this national newsroom and there was an entertainment arm of the newsroom and I would always beg to just go to stuff. So I was an intern there and the Sex and the City, the final season, the Sex and the City premiere was happening. And I just like waltzed into the entertainment producer's office and I was like, can I please come with you? Please. Just begged. And he let me come. And so, yeah, I always have just loved pop culture so much, loved entertainment news. So I was sort of weaseling my way over there. Yeah. And then when a job became available, I got that job. I left the, and it was a little bit less 24-hour news. Like we weren't there at 2 in the morning doing that, but we were out covering red carpets and we went to the Oscars and it was amazing. So I was probably doing it from 2005 or 2006 to 2009 for them. Okay. And I continued covering red carpets and parties for a while. And it's its own form of reporting, like when you're in the newsroom, it's its own thing. And then when you're out there, it's having to come up with questions that are not the same exact question as every single other person on this red carpet. TV takes precedence and then it goes down the line to maybe print, I guess. And then probably at the very end, radio is towards the end at that point. So it was really coming up with pithy questions that they hadn't heard, good sound bites because them just saying what they're wearing or them just saying good, fine, one word answers that doesn't help us tell a story on the radio. So it was it was fun, but it was also still work.
Yeah. You had own set of challenges, right?
Yeah. But it was cool. It was cool to be young and interviewing Mr. Big before he was canceled or to be at like the Sopranos premiere. And I loved that show and whole family loved it and be, interviewing Pauly Walnuts and seeing who was jolly and fun and a great interview and who maybe less so. And it was great. It was fun.
Oh, their real personalities come out.
Yeah.
And you get to do that.
Yeah. Their toleration for you.
Yeah.
And their toleration for that setting.
Yeah. And the questions, like another one like this.
But when people watch it and they're like, they're so bad, they suck so much, I'm always like, it is a lot harder than it looks, guys. It's harder than it looks.
Yeah. I could only imagine. And the stress.
And there's a lot of people coming down. So to have an interesting gem of a question for dozens of people. I mean, I think the award shows then would be the hardest, but we would, go cover one movie premiere or one show premiere. So that's easier to prepare for,
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Okay. So I have to ask you about choosing your stories. So when I was in college, I went to school thinking I was going to go into journalism. It is what I wanted to do. I was like, I am going to be on TV and report the news or something to that effect. And I had this amazing professor and it was my first class. And it was mass communications because it's like the standard class you take when you start journalism. And he was a fascinating human being. He's an older guy. He's friends with the Ramseys. Remember Jean-Bonnet Ramsey, the little girl? Okay, so I was in Boulder. So he knew them. Oh. He was a plethora of knowledge. And he said to us on the first day of class, if you think you're going to do journalism, that's great. I want you to know that you will never get to report what you want to. It will always be told to you what you're going to do. And when he said that, I immediately said, well, I'm done because no one's going to tell me what to say.
I think that's true. And it isn't, though. I'm sad that it dissuaded you because.
But I'm curious how it looked for you.
I think if you're in a newsroom, you can't control the news, right? But you can also control working in the entertainment news section or working in the hard news, breaking news section or working in investigative reports so I think you do have choice unless you're working in breaking news. But I think it's almost like that's the way that, doctors choose a specialty and some people just like to be in the ER with stuff being thrown at them. Not that I would ever compare journalism to medicine, but, I'm sad it dissuaded you because I think you can choose definitely more over time because back then, no, I could not really choose. But even by the time I became an entertainment news producer, I could say like, oh, look, okay, this is an up and coming person and we should cover this person. Or like, I don't know why this is what's standing out, but But Will Shorts, who does the New York
Yes.
Times crossword
Yeah.
every single day,
Yeah.
or is like the icon of that section, there was a documentary about him, and we were like, we should do this. You know, that was completely our feeling like he would be such a fascinating interview subject. And so you do have more control. I think it depends on where you work and it depends on the circumstances. And now it's like, it's both. I have control over what assignments I might accept, for sure.
Yeah.
And or then I have control over what I'm pitching.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm pitching a story, I mean, it doesn't mean they have to take it, but that's something that I want to dive into. Or, you know, for those stories like Jenna Ortega or something, that comes to me, where my editor at the magazine is sort of like, we want to do a cover about her and will you write it? So it's both. It's a little bit of both. And sometimes stories will come where I'm like, do I want to dive into that topic? Do I want to give my time to that? Honestly, no.
Yeah.
And I think over time, you gain a little bit more control over it.
A little more seniority.
Yeah, maybe a little more seniority. But I think it's probably also a skill to be like, okay, here's a topic, you know nothing about it. It's a lot of times the essence of journalism. Here's a topic, you know nothing about it. You have to go learn about it, do the reporting, make the calls, do the research. And yeah, a lot of times it was stuff that I would not have necessarily chosen, but it's all part of learning the job.
Were there pitches that they said no to? Do you remember any?
God, that's such a good question. Yeah, definitely. There were ones that they said no to. Oh, well, just recently, I wanted to do a JLo cover. And so I kind of went to one of my editors and I was like, we should do this JLo cover. And I put a lot of effort and energy into the pitch as I would make it. You know, like, she has been through all of these public disastrous breakups, and yet she also made this whole documentary about her romantic life and puts it out there. So she invites it in a certain sense, but then people do relish in her downfall in a way. And like, I think that there was just a lot of curiosity, and my editor agreed. And I think maybe they were trying or have tried, but then I don't know that it's come to pass.
Okay.
So that's kind of one where it's like, will it ever happen? I don't know.
Such a good one.
Maybe not.
We're also fascinated by her.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by her, and I want to know what's going through her mind.
Well, I noticed that when I'm reading your articles, your voice is very clear. I've read the Bad Bunny, the Giselle, like most recently the Jenna Ortega. You're a fantastic writer.
Thank you.
And I enjoy reading it because they keep going deeper as you get further in. And I love that about your storytelling, about how you bring the story to life. And the Jenna Ortega piece, like how you're sitting there and you're describing where she's at and you're literally inside the banquet, like with you guys.
So glad.
You're in it. And I think that not everyone does that. Not everyone gets that in this kind of journalism. And I honestly, with magazines just not being published anymore, I think it's difficult.
Rough time,
right?
magazines.
It is. I get magazines. I still get the Wall Street Journal. I like paper. I go
do
and
too.
buy the books.
Yeah,
like
same,
that person.
Same.
I don't like reading on an electronic device.
I hate reading on an electronic
I want it
device.
in my hands. I want to be in a bookstore. I want to be surrounded by it.
Me too.
But I really love the way you tell a story.
Thank you.
How long did that take to find your voice in this? Because I could imagine, like any other art form or any other creative outlet, it takes time to really get your groove into how you're going to put a piece together. Was there one piece that kind of, you're like, this is it. This is who I am. This is how I tell my stories.
I think, first of all, thank you. That's so nice. I think it is a learning experience, and it's like writing your way through it. And I think it's a push and pull between a few things where it's like there's a story that's happening when you're sitting across from someone and the interaction you're having with them in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's also the context and everything that has happened before that, right? So what do they have going on in their life? What is in their personal life, in their career? How have they been received? All of the kind of like voices outside just the two of you. And then trying to put them together. And I think probably earlier on in my career, I was a little bit more like, this is what they said, and not just regurgitating it, never wanting to just regurgitate what they said. But I think as time goes on, wanting more context and kind of take what they're saying as one piece of this story and adding my observation as another part, you know, to kind of to give it more, hopefully, like richness and depth, and not just like, I met this person and this is what they told me. And usually the people that I interview, I don't really question what they're saying. I don't question that it's the truth. It's not like, doing a profile of a polarizing person who could be like gaming you. But at the same time, I think you have to think about what the reader is going to be, what's going to be going through their mind. And it's like, it's not my job just to come and tell everyone what they told me. I think it has to be more than that. It has to be more of, tying together all of those outside voices and them and my observation of them as the person sitting there. So yeah, I think that's been the thing. That's been the thing that I've worked on doing more and more. And at the same time, I never want to put myself too much into the story and be like, we were talking about this and we bonded about this, or me. Like, I find that really boring and I hate when people do it. I'm kind of like, I don't care about you. I really don't care about you. I care about the person you're interviewing and what kind of observations and thoughts you're going to share with me. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. AOC was the first cover story I did for Vanity Fair, but I feel like I interviewed a lot of people, not just her, to sort of like put her in context and also to sort of like show who these people are as human beings, because everyone has an idea of a super famous person. You have your ideas and your notions. I feel like the point of a multi-thousand word feature story it's not like the CNN or the MSNBC or the Fox interview you're going to get with them. It's like, if someone were to spend it, can I curse? No.
Yes, you
a
can.
Shitload of time with someone and thinking about someone, there's going to be a lot more that comes up. And so I'm always like, who are these people just as human beings? And if you were to meet and know them in real life, what would you find? And I think for both of those, I appreciated it when people were like, okay, you made me think differently about it, even though that's not even my intent, or I didn't know how they were thinking about it. But people were like, oh, I think I understand this person better.
Yeah, but we only get a glimpse of what they're doing on TV or movies or politically. You don't know them as people.
Yeah, you don't know how they were raised. You don't know
the background
in their mind. You don't know, I think like in the AOC case, it's like you don't know what her background was, like being a really working class person, losing her dad to cancer in college. For any human being, like how does that impact you and your goals?
Absolutely.
So all that kind of human stuff that you can take the time to dive into, I love that.
Yeah. I have a question about your process, because I have noticed, since we've known each other now for a while, when you go off social media, you're about to either do a story, write a story, get ready for a story, but you literally tell everyone, I'm out of here. Bye. I'll be back. And I'm fascinated by it. And I'm so curious. And we all need a social media break, FYI. Like, everyone, go ahead, take a break. But why do you do it? Is it part of the process to get focused? Like, what is it?
I mean, sometimes that's just me being like, this is such a waste of my time. I'm wasting so much time on here. I can't help it. It's just so addictive. And so I'll just be like, I have too much to do and I cannot be on here. At the same time, I often have to stalk that person that I'm stalked by.
No, but it's true.
But yeah, it's like with Bad Bunny, he was contemporaneously posting shirtless selfies of himself or being on vacation with Kendall Jenner. It's like, I can't miss that either. That is very important, relevant information. It's not necessarily strategic. Sometimes just like, I have to get off of here and I have no self-control. And so I have to just, sometimes writing that then holds me accountable to be like, bye, like this is not working for me. And it's a time suck, because otherwise I just can't use it in a measured way. I can't just like go on and then get off. I'll be like, wait, 40 minutes have just passed that I should have been
disappeared
writing.
Disappeared.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great for, I think, writers in general. But about the royal family, I have also another account that I only follow royal things or like upper crusty British and London things. And that's where I'm like, okay, I'm not seeing any friends. I'm just seeing like British socialites, members of the British royal family, properties to which they visit, Highclere Castle, and like all these estates that you can visit, just all this ridiculous stuff. And so that is another way where it's like, if Instagram is getting you down and you have a niche interest, dogs, cooking, whatever,
dogs,
just make a dogs account. And that is one way of like still being on, or in that sense, it's almost like Pinterest was, where you're like, just show me stuff that might be inspirational.
Show me corgis. That's all I want to see.
Yeah.
Corgi butts.
A corgi Instagram would be beautiful.
What brought you to writing about the royal family?
I think it was kind of an inappropriate, lifelong, morbid interest. Both my parents grew up in Queens in Astoria, and my grandma was the mom of 7 kids.
Okay.
So she was at the grocery store like every day. And then she was a voracious grocery store buyer of like The Star, The Inquirer, all of those things. I mean, she also had TV Guides and other magazines around. And I was always just a voracious reader from the time I was a kid, reading everything on her coffee table. But I was probably like 8 reading about Fergie's sex scandals and
the weight loss and what was happening with her body.
Being like, and then having affairs and getting divorced and just all the melodrama of the early 90s. And so I think it really started with that, where I just saw them as these like soap operatic figures. Mm-hmm. And then when I worked at Cosmo, after I was at ABC, I did some freelancing, I bopped around, and then I landed at Cosmo magazine, online first and then in print. And online, that was sort of the heyday of Kate and William, where they had just gotten married and they were then having Prince George. And it was really an internet moment. And then even at my job just before that, that was their royal wedding. So we were covering that. And I think I was really fascinated by this entry of this woman who was my exact age. We actually had the exact same birthday, exact same year. I was also getting married at that time. And so it was sort of like people were giving me like replica rings and like having so much fun with it. And I think that's what happens with the royal family. Like that was what a lot of our moms, why they had this affinity for Princess Diana, because you're kind of like going through life with these people at the same time. As ridiculous as it can be, when you're planning a wedding yourself and there's a ginormous royal wedding on TV, like you can't help but
you have to watch
draw some parallels there, and you have to watch it.
Who was going to make her dress? I will
exactly
to this day remember waiting to hear, having guesses. Everyone was like, "Who do you think it's going to be?" I'm like, "It has to be an English designer."
Yeah,
she will not wear anything that's not an English designer.
Yeah,
I'm like, it has to be da 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 da,
and just like quaking,
yes,
being like, "Let me see this person."
Yes.
And I thought I was so fascinated by just the common woman coming into that family, and how would she fit in? How would she belong or not? Mm-hmm. And then, people are obviously like, who cares? Like literally who cares about any of this, which I actually respect. I totally respect that. I'm like, I'm not going to press you into paying attention to this. But then I think there are really interesting kind of signs of the times that emerge with it, where like you said, the way that the media kind of shat on Meghan and tore her apart, like racist, sexist, all this stuff. And then I think specifically too, and I've written about this, the way that they pitted these two women against each other, where it's kind of like, think about that from a societal, from a media standpoint. That was what the press, and like a very toxic press in Britain, just that's how they decided to approach this. And does it really root to these women? I actually don't think so. I think it really roots to the brothers and like a lifetime of tension there and family dynamics there. But the knee jerk was to say there's a catfight between these two women over bridesmaids' dresses or whatever. And it just goes to show that, that kind of misogyny sells, and it's salacious, and it comes at people's expense. They're like, it's so much easier to just do that than to be like, these two brothers did not get along.
Yeah. Because why would you want to put them against each other?
Yeah, no, of course, like they would not be, of course, this is a women's problem.
Of course, it's always a woman's problem.
Always.
I want to talk about the Anne Hathaway movie.
The Idea of You.
Okay, so you reviewed The Idea of You, and the book was older, and I honestly didn't know the book was as old as it was. It wasn't that old. It's like 2020 or whatever. 2022, when was it?
No, even a little earlier. It had a big pandemic resurgence, but I think it was even like a 2017 or 2018 book, but it had a big pandemic surge.
Yeah. So I read the book. Someone messaged me and said, Maria, this is going to be a movie because so side note, I love every romantic comedy ever made. Okay. I will watch.
Did you watch Nobody Wants This?
Yes.
With Adam Brody? Oh my God, it's so good.
Obsessed.
It's incredible.
And then recently Dax just was talking about a fact check, and he was talking about the kiss that everyone talks about.
Oh, really?
And he was like, I was so proud of her because it conveyed. And then he looked at her and goes, I don't think you've ever kissed me like that.
I saw that headline, I think. That's so funny.
But it wasn't, so this was taken out of context, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because really, the whole thing he said was, I'm so proud of her. It just shows how great of an actress she is and how they made that. It felt so real. I mean, it was one of the greatest things, greatest kisses I've ever seen.
Oh, good.
Like that and the Notebook kissing in the rain and then the Spider-Man upside down kiss. Like those are all now like
love
on the list. So when this movie was coming out, The Idea of You, my friend was like, you have to see this, but read the book. I'm like, okay. So I read the book first. And then you posted like, I'm like, almost like you're so mad. You're like, I'm
still mad.
Now
I stay mad about it.
Reviewed and I have my own opinion. So I loved the book. It's escapism.
Yeah.
I want to read and disappear everything that's happening in my life and just be absorbed into these books.
Totally.
And that's how I felt with The Idea of You. And I thought this woman, this Solon, right? Selene was this badass mom who could do anything. And there was not a need for someone else to be fulfilling her life. She was doing it. And then the movie came out. And my friends who didn't read the book, like you said in your article, will like the movie. But if you read the book and then watched the movie, my heart was just thrown out of my chest because they just diminished her so massively. And you wrote this in your article. So I'm reading a quote from the article. It demeans viewers to assume we couldn't possibly see ourselves in a woman like that. It ignores the fact that we already did when we read Lee's words. I have the choice.
Yeah, I mean, look, Hollywood's gonna Hollywood. But I think I kind of expected maybe more. Stupidly, naively, I expected more in 2024, than like the usual reductive stuff. But the reason why the book went so viral and had this pandemic moment was that the escapism you're talking about, it's a 40-year-old woman and 20-year-old man, which, I mean, technically he's a man, having this like global love affair. She's sort of rediscovering herself in an amazing way after being divorced. And I think exactly, we all love this badass woman. We love that she was owning it. I loved the kind of tipping of the expectations where like we've seen that story so many times in the reverse in real life, in film, that it's like to see the woman in that position. And now you're seeing it a ton in a lot of different movies and
so many
and books. But to see it like that was a really striking portrayal of it. And then for the movie to make that character so much to make her lame was just like not an adaptation. It just defeated the entire purpose. And the message it sent, I thought I was really depressed by, where it was like, we couldn't possibly have that character from the book exist in like a mainstream movie because people wouldn't like her. They would have too many issues with her. And it's like, no, we do.
Yeah. And at what point did 40 become old? I'm sorry.
And I see nothing wrong with anything that happened in the book. So I don't understand why that it's very counterintuitive to be like, this book that people love for this reason, we're going to take and then just like morph into something lamer and tamer.
Yeah. And it's almost like when you hit 40, it's like you just don't have sex anymore. No, that's not true.
No.
Well, and also, why can't you rediscover that? If she's divorced and maybe she hasn't had boyfriends or whatever, and she meets this super hot guy who turns her on, why diminish that for her? Like, why aren't women allowed to have sex for fun and be with someone who's hot? And be also super badass and have your own career and your own money and not have to follow some man around. He's kind of following you around. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. And the only reason why she was single in the movie is because her husband cheated on her. So she did not have agency really in the situation. She's like another like scorned woman, another like pathetic woman who was cast aside by her husband. When I think in the book, I know in the book, it was because I'm a The Idea of You scholar, Maria. This is like my passion project. But like in the book, it was that I think they kind of just like, she wanted to go back to work. She wanted to have her own life. And he wanted her to be kind of like the like law partner's wife who just was like really docile and really satisfied with that situation. And she wasn't satisfied with that situation. So I think it was just like a really depressing adaptation that diminished something that we all loved So I would just say, like, we just got to treasure the book.
Yeah. Read the book. Okay. If you haven't read the book, I'm going to link it down below in all of the little show notes.
I was at a party on Friday night, and I think two friends of both of ours were there, and one of them was like, "You're not going to believe this, but this person didn't like the idea of you." And I was like, that's okay. Like, I handled it really well. I was like, reading is so subjective, and you don't have to like it. You didn't have to like it. Did I love it, and do I live for it? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. But my friends and I vary a lot. We started a book club. We have mutual friends in the book club, and they have pushed me to read books I don't normally read.
Okay.
Like, I like books that are escapism. I really do. I don't want to know about children who are hurt, psychological thrillers.
Same.
I don't need it. I want to go to bed at night with fluff and happiness in my heart. So
I completely agree. I do not want to be psychologically thrilled.
I don't. But I have friends who love them. They're like, they get so deep into the scariness of it, the psychological craziness of it. I'm like, no, I got enough going on.
Not for me.
I don't need it.
No, it's not for me.
Okay, so I want to talk about these reviews. What brought you to reviewing books in general? Is it just because you're a voracious reader and you enjoy it? Like, how did you step on that?
The culture umbrella at Vogue is really broad. It can be theater, it can be books, it can be politics, it can be news, it can be like award season boyfriends, the things that you're talking about with your friends at lunch or whatever. So it's a pretty wide net, and books is definitely part of it. So I think it probably started there in interviewing authors there. And then now I also review books for the New York Times, which is honestly such a joy. And I'm kind of like, should I be a book reviewer? But it would be a hard job because it's a time investment just to write that comparably short story. It's kind of, to read 300 pages or more. And that does hurt when I take every assignment they give me. Whenever they're like, do you want to review a book? I always say yes. And it's not always a book that I want to read, but I think it's good. It's a good exercise to go in and be like, what is strong about this book? What is less strong? Whether or not I wanted to read this or not, and come at it impartially. And I love doing it. I really love doing it.
And it gets you reading.
It's fun. Yeah, it does get me reading things that I wouldn't read for sure.
Yeah. I would be terrible at that job.
For Vogue, I feel like write about books that I want to read or have read already. So I read The Idea of You recreationally and then was like, oh, I'm going to do an entire manifesto on this.
You reviewed a book called Ejaculate Responsibly. And it was written by this woman named Gabrielle Blair, who is a Mormon with 5 or 6 children, I think. 6 children. And she wrote a book about abortions aren't just a woman's issue. And they are a women's issue. We can't diminish that because we're the ones carrying the babies.
Yeah.
But the key claim is that 99% of abortions are the result of unwanted pregnancies. And men cause all unwanted pregnancies.
Yeah.
And when I read that, my mind exploded. And I'm like, this is what I've been trying to say and think about forever. So when I'm reading through it and I'm like, this is so true because women are for 24 hours able to have a baby, right? They ovulate for 24 hours. That's it. It's over 2 days, they say, but it could be Tuesday to Wednesday. 24 hours. Men can deliver their sperm every single day of their life until they die.
Yeah. Yeah, the age span for this is insane, right? The fertile period for a woman over the course of any given month is so brief compared to a man being fertile every single day of, ostensibly. And yeah, I loved this book too. I loved just the argument that abortions and birth control in general is not solely a women's issue. And I think it's a huge thing in caps that's like, it's the men. It just really reframes this. And in a way, like, this is hiding in plain sight. I mean, it's revolutionary, I think, but it should not be. But it's like men are very, very much culpable and responsible in these issues. The fact that it came out as like Roe v. Wade was being overturned and like all these rights were coming under attack, I think was coincidental, if I'm not mistaken. She was sort of like, she had it in the works just based on the way that like, abortion rights were being chipped away. But it's like, of course it's also the men. Of course they're culpable for this. And of course they should vigilantly wear condoms and get vasectomies. And like the onus and the focus has to go not just solely on women, but also to be shared by them. Of course.
Yeah, of course. But no one talks about it.
No one talks about it.
I have 2 boys. They're going to have to read this book.
Yeah, they're going to have to read this book.
They're going to understand it. I mean, they're so little now.
Yeah.
But it's so important that they also take responsibility for it.
Yes.
So she goes through 27 reasons of, what we have to think about when it comes to men also being responsible for abortions and having sex and what happens.
Yeah.
Number 23 is there are 0 consequences for men who ejaculate irresponsibly. I've been getting on this book so much because I just want more people to talk about it. And I want our teens who are starting to be sexually active, understand that you have to wear a condom.
Yeah.
And as women, we are not allowed to buy condoms because then we look like sluts.
Right.
Why can't women just have sex to have fun and enjoy it? Why can men do it all the time? And I just found this book to really pinpoint all of those things. Now, it doesn't diminish the fact that abortion is a woman's issue. It is in our body. They're gone.
Yeah.
The man is gone.
Yeah.
Whether he sticks around as a father or a figure in the life of the child is something different.
Yeah. And I think even though that's so true and at the end of the day or that the actual medical and everything, the care, that is very much a woman's issue. But when it's being discussed, I like to say, but because people refer to their daughters, right? They're kind of oh, I don't want my daughter to have less rights than my mother or me. And I'm kind of but it's actually all of our kids.
Yeah.
And it's not just the daughters. I always actually make a point to say, but I also want these rights for my son because he will be a sexually active person who chances are this is going to be affecting him too. And it's not even just about wanting this for our daughters. It's about wanting this for all of our kids, an equitable kind of world where they can make these decisions and be free to make these decisions. But I think that constant reframing has to be there that it's not just women, it's not just girls. Men are affected by this. If your girlfriend gets pregnant, that doesn't affect your life. I mean, technically you could walk away, but I think it does affect your life. Your child is walking around in the world. So it's so obvious. In some ways the book is so obvious, but it's so criminally unsaid that it needs to be said. Yeah. And I really do honestly think that it should be sex ed for all of our kids. It's very to the point. And the author said this when I interviewed her. She's it is very heterosexual. And she's this is just the way that I'm framing it because this is the typical and popular way that babies are conceived. So this is when we're talking about birth control, she does frame it in that way. But I think it is a really important data point, and I really do think it should be sex ed for our kids.
So that if you start becoming sexually active, which the majority of them will, wrap it up, wear a condom, be responsible. Everything you do as a man has a repercussion when you ejaculate.
Yeah, and framing it that way. Exactly.
Right?
Framing it as this is every single one of your issue to address. It's not the girl's issue to address. It's all of your issue to address.
All of it. All of us with boys are this
for
is
sure. This is going to be required reading in my household.
Sorry, guys.
It's happening. My mom slipped Ejaculate Responsibly under my door.
Except I took the cover, guys, just so you know, I took the cover off of the book because I took it to the nail salon and didn't feel like it was appropriate to be reading it with the book cover. Okay, so now I want to know what's next for you. As much as you can tell us.
Next for me is that I am laboriously working on a novel inspired by the real life royal family saga. So I'll leave here today and keep at it. I have a bad first draft of it and I'm trying to piece it together and clean it up and hopefully progress. It's hard.
Oh, I can only
imagine. A whole different other challenge and it's hard, but it's also fun and it's a mind trip, but it's fun making up stories.
Oh, I can't wait.
I hope it'll give you the glittering escapism that you seek, Maria.
Everything you write, if it's like what you read already, I'm going to be so escaped into it. And then I'm going to fangirl and then I'm going to have you back on the podcast.
Come back. Fingers crossed. Knock on wood. No jinxing, but I'll come back.
This was awesome.
It was.
I'm so glad you were here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
This has been the
best.
Fun. As we're freezing. By the way, it's freezing inside the studio. It's okay, though. It keeps us alert.
Congrats on your podcast.
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much for joining me today on She's Smart. You can find a new episode every Thursday. Bye.